The air was thick with tension as reporters crowded outside the marble-pillared federal courthouse. A media frenzy had erupted the moment word leaked that Karoline Leavitt, the fiery White House press secretary under President Donald Trump, was set to testify in a closed-door hearing involving federal corruption charges. Charges that had implications far beyond what the public knew. Karoline wasn't just there as a spokesperson. She had become a central figure in the administration's whistleblower task force, exposing a network of judicial bribery and backroom deals. Today's proceedings were meant to be discreet, but nothing stays secret for long in Washington. Inside the courtroom, Judge Marvin Hadley, a 64-year-old who had worn the federal robe for more than 3 decades, sat perched high above, exuding the kind of authority that had gone unquestioned for too long. He was known for his sharp tongue, vintage ego, and well-hidden alliances. In political circles, some whispered about his unusual verdicts, his wealth, and connections to lobbying giants. Karoline walked into the courtroom wearing a navy blue blazer and confidence that commanded attention. She was escorted by Secret Service agents and her legal counsel, ready to provide testimony in the investigation against a corrupt judicial syndicate. As she took the stand, Hadley leaned forward, looking down his nose at her. Well, he said with a smug grin. If it isn't the president's little press puppet. Tell me, Miss Leavitt, did they teach you courtroom procedure at the same time they taught you how to spin lies for the American people? The courtroom gasped. Reporters' fingers froze mid-typing. Even the stenographer momentarily stopped. Karoline, without flinching, turned her eyes to Judge Hadley and said calmly, Your Honor, I expected professionalism in a federal court, not political theater. If your ego needs applause, perhaps a late-night talk show would be more appropriate. Hadley's face turned red. He banged the gavel. You will not disrespect this court, Miss Leavitt. And you, Your Honor, she shot back, will not use this courtroom to smear a sitting government official for political gain. Her voice was steady. She knew the risk. But what she didn't know was that her team had discovered something far more explosive the night before. Evidence that Hadley himself was knee-deep in the very corruption case under investigation. Back at the White House, President Trump had been briefed personally. He told his inner circle, if that judge crosses the line today, let justice rain down faster than a hammer on steel. Meanwhile, in a secure backroom, FBI agents and DOJ investigators sat poised with sealed warrants and surveillance logs detailing wire transfers, offshore accounts, and secret meetings, each tying back to Judge Hadley. Karoline's testimony began, but Hadley continued to interrupt her, belittle her, and dismiss evidence. I will not allow conspiracy theories to contaminate this courtroom, he sneered as Karoline presented documentation of his links to a D.C. lobbying firm that had mysteriously funneled funds through shell corporations. But just as he dismissed her submission, the back doors of the courtroom flung open. FBI Special Agent Rebecca Sloan walked in, flanked by 2 armed agents. Judge Hadley, she announced clearly, you are under arrest for obstruction of justice, conspiracy to commit fraud, and accepting bribes from foreign lobbying entities. The courtroom erupted. Hadley's gavel fell from his hand as 2 agents moved toward the bench. You can't do this, he barked. This is my courtroom. Not anymore, Agent Sloan replied, pulling out the sealed arrest warrant. You disgraced it the moment you tried to turn it into your playground. Karoline sat still, watching justice finally catch up to power. And it wasn't over yet. That night, as Hadley sat in a holding cell, disheveled and stunned, he was visited by his lawyer, a fast-talking D.C. fixer named Preston Miles. You're in trouble, Marvin. Real trouble. The FBI has tapes. They've got surveillance logs, transfers, emails, and they've got Karoline. Hadley snarled. She's a mouthpiece, nothing more. Preston leaned in. She's not just a mouthpiece anymore. She's the face of justice. And tomorrow, she's dropping names. The judge slumped. Then we take her down. Any way possible. Preston shook his head. You're not running the show anymore. But someone out there still might want her silenced. The morning after Judge Hadley's arrest, America woke to a storm of headlines. While some networks downplayed the scandal, others blasted it full volume. Press Secretary Karoline Leavitt uncovers judicial crime ring. Federal power players shaken as Trump admin takes on deep state judges. For Karoline, it was never about fame. She had taken on this mission knowing the dangers. What she didn't expect was just how fast the enemies she'd rattled would strike back. At 8:03 a.m., just as Karoline exited her secure transport SUV and entered a private government building in Northern Virginia for a follow-up intelligence debrief, a black unmarked van screeched to a halt 2 blocks away. From its side panel, a drone launched into the sky, small, agile, barely visible to the human eye. It zipped past rooftops, aimed directly at the 14th floor where Karoline's meeting was scheduled. Inside the conference room, she sat across from DOJ Director Angela Breckenridge, discussing a sealed list of names Karoline was ready to hand over for federal indictment. That's when the windows trembled. Boom! The blast rocked the top corner of the building. Fire alarms blared. Security personnel flooded in. Smoke filled the hallway as agents rushed Karoline into the protected elevator shaft. Was that a? Yes, Breckenridge barked. That was a drone strike. Someone's sending a message. Meanwhile, surveillance teams tracked the van's plate, which traced back to a fake security company. The driver had already vanished. What the FBI did find, however, was chilling. An encrypted phone with a recorded voice message. Tell the little blonde mouthpiece to keep quiet. Or next time we don't miss. Back at the White House, President Trump watched news of the explosion in real time. Get her on the line. Now! He roared to his chief of staff. Minutes later, Karoline appeared on the secured video feed, hair slightly tousled, but her demeanor rock solid. Are you okay? Trump asked. I'm fine. They wanted to scare me. They failed. You sure you still want to move forward with this? He asked, more solemn now. Karoline didn't hesitate. They tried to silence me in that courtroom with insults. Now they're trying to silence me with fear. But I won't back down, sir. America deserves to know who's pulling these strings. Trump nodded, silent for a beat. Then we'll put every asset behind you. No more closed doors. It's time to take this public. Within the hour, the White House announced a primetime press conference scheduled for 8 p.m. that night. Karoline would take the podium and reveal the corruption network's web, name by name, judge by judge, donor by donor. The announcement sent shockwaves across Washington. Phones rang. Lawyers scrambled. Private jets fired up from Virginia to New York as some of the accused tried to flee. But Karoline wasn't done. She had one more card to play. An anonymous source within Hadley's inner circle had contacted her directly. Using the codename Clementi, he offered her an internal ledger, a secret record of payouts and verdict instructions stored on a single encrypted flash drive. The meeting was arranged under tight security at an abandoned hotel in Arlington. Karoline, wearing a baseball cap and accompanied by 2 elite agents, stepped into the dimly lit lobby. Clementi, she asked softly. From the shadows, a man in his 40s stepped forward. Nervous. Sweating. I worked for Hadley, he whispered. For years. Filing, cleaning, erasing. I can't live with it anymore. He handed over the flash drive. But before Karoline could ask another question. Crack. A sniper's bullet ripped through the lobby window, striking Clementi in the shoulder. He dropped to the ground screaming. Down. Down. Agents shouted, dragging Karoline to cover and firing back. It was an ambush. Someone really didn't want that drive to make it to prime time. The sniper's bullet shattered the calm night air, and Karoline's ears rang from the gunshot echoing through the abandoned Arlington hotel lobby. Agents tackled her to the floor, shielding her body with theirs. Secure the drive, one yelled. Move, move. Clementi lay groaning beside a toppled chair, blood blooming from his shoulder. They know, he mumbled. They know I talked. Within seconds, backup arrived. SWAT units swarmed the area. The sniper was already gone, leaving behind a silenced shell casing on a rooftop 4 blocks away. A message in the moonlight. But they hadn't succeeded. The flash drive had been retrieved, intact. Karoline was rushed back to the White House under a full federal escort, lights off, evasive route. In the Situation Room, cybercrime experts cracked open the encryption with the president himself watching over their shoulders. What they uncovered stunned even the most cynical agents in the room. The ledger detailed 12 years of covert judicial transactions. High-profile bribery schemes, case-fixing, and politically motivated rulings, all linked to offshore accounts and elite law firms. Names on the list included former cabinet officials, 2 ex-senators, and even a sitting Supreme Court justice. "Holy hell," one agent whispered. Karoline leaned over and tapped the screen. "This is the rot," she said. "This is why Judge Hadley smirked when he insulted me in court. He thought the whole system was his shield." President Trump, jaw clenched, turned toward Karoline. "Go out there tonight and burn that shield to the ground." By 7:59 p.m., America was waiting. TV anchors paused mid-sentence as networks cut live to the White House press briefing room. Twitter servers began to throttle as millions flooded in to watch. In cities across the country, people gathered in bars, living rooms, coffee shops, waiting. At exactly 8 p.m., Karoline Leavitt stepped up to the podium. She looked calm, composed, but her eyes carried fire. "Good evening, my fellow Americans," she began, her voice clear and firm. "Tonight, I do not come to you simply as the White House press secretary. I come as a citizen, a patriot, and a witness to corruption so deep, so coordinated, it threatens the very foundation of justice in this nation." A hush fell over the nation. "In the past 72 hours, I have provided federal authorities with a verified ledger containing the names of judges, public officials, and financial operatives who have conspired to manipulate the American legal system in exchange for personal and political gain." She paused, letting it sink in. The man who insulted me in court, Judge Marvin Hadley, was not acting alone. He was a central figure in what can only be described as a shadow network. A network that has protected predators, silenced whistleblowers, and profited from injustice. She raised a printed page. "These are the first 10 names. More will follow." Gasps echoed from the press corps. Cameras zoomed in on the paper. Names that had once adorned Washington galas and news panels were now symbols of betrayal. "I know some will call this political. Others will try to distract you. But I stand here not for politics, but for truth. And truth, no matter how dangerous, will always prevail." Reporters shouted questions as she finished, but Karoline walked off without answering a single one. She had said enough. Within minutes, arrest warrants were issued across 5 states. 2 former senators tried fleeing by private jet, both grounded by air marshals. The sitting justice issued a statement of denial, but his staff resigned en masse the next day. And the American people? They responded with fury. Protests erupted, not against the administration, but against the decades of silence that allowed such a network to exist. "No more silent judges" trended online for 48 straight hours. But even as justice roared forward, danger still lingered in the shadows. In a quiet corner of a private club in D.C., a man in a dark suit tapped a cigar against a crystal glass and muttered to a colleague. "She lit the match, all right, but let's see if she can survive the fire she started." 3 days had passed since Karoline Leavitt's historic press conference, and Washington still hadn't recovered. The Department of Justice had already issued 43 subpoenas, frozen over a dozen bank accounts linked to shell corporations, and began proceedings to remove multiple federal judges. The ripple effects hit every branch of power, and Karoline was at the center of it. But with exposure came peril. Late Thursday night, Karoline sat in her office overlooking the National Mall. A soft rain tapped at the window as if echoing the quiet intensity inside her. On her desk sat 2 items, the original encrypted drive and a handwritten note left anonymously in her private mailbox. "You took one judge down. You won't survive if you go after the others." The handwriting was neat, precise, almost smug. She showed the note to the president earlier that morning. Trump didn't blink. "You have my word, Karoline," he said. "We don't retreat from this. Not now. Not ever." Just then, her intercom buzzed. "Ma'am, Director Breckenridge is here to see you." Angela Breckenridge walked in, trench coat soaked from the rain, carrying a red folder marked top priority. "Karoline," she said, "we've tracked something. A safe house in Maryland under a false company name. We believe it's where the remaining judges are coordinating what's left of their cover-up." Karoline leaned forward. "Do we have enough to move in?" Angela gave a thin smile. "We do now. Thanks to your press conference, a second whistleblower just came forward. And this one? He's a federal clerk with audio recordings." Karoline stood up. "Let's bring them in." At exactly 4:30 a.m., under the cover of darkness, a joint team of U.S. Marshals, FBI agents, and military intelligence descended on the secluded estate just outside Annapolis. Inside, 3 federal judges, a retired senator, and a corporate lobbyist were seated around a fireplace sipping bourbon and laughing about how long this media circus would last. They didn't even have time to reach for their phones. "Federal agents. Hands where we can see them." It was over in under 3 minutes. No shots fired. No resistance. Just stunned expressions and the cold click of handcuffs. One of the judges, Elliot Crane, turned to the lead agent with a shaky voice. "You can't arrest me. I was appointed by the president 20 years ago." The agent didn't flinch. "And you've been betraying your oath ever since." Back at the White House, Karoline was handed a secure line. On the other end was the agent who made the arrests. "They're in custody," he confirmed. "No casualties. We've seized documents, hard drives, and multiple bank codes. It's done." Karoline exhaled deep and long. The war wasn't over. But this battle, this one was won. Later that afternoon, she stood once more before the American people. In every generation, there comes a moment where we must choose between comfort and courage. I chose courage not for myself, but for every American who ever believed that justice should be blind, not bought. The crowd outside the White House gates erupted in cheers. From the steps of the Lincoln Memorial to the balconies of small-town courthouses, people held up signs that read, "Truth has a voice, her name is Karoline." 1 week later, Karoline returned to the very same courtroom where she had once been insulted by Judge Hadley. This time, she wasn't there to speak. She simply stood in the back, silently, as a new federal judge, appointed under emergency reform, sentenced Hadley to 25 years in prison for corruption, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy against the state. As he was led away in handcuffs, Hadley locked eyes with her. But there was no smirk this time. Only shame. Karoline turned, walked out, and stepped into a bright spring morning. The battle for justice would always rage on, but she had proven that even the most powerful could be held accountable. And in doing so, she reminded the nation of a truth it desperately needed. Courage isn't about speaking loudly. It's about speaking when it counts.